Athena, one of the 12 Olympian deities in Greek mythology, was revered as the goddess of wisdom, warfare, and skilled crafts. Unlike many other gods and goddesses, her myths are distinct for their absence of romantic entanglements or offspring. From the earliest sources, she is presented as a Parthenus, a maiden goddess whose virginity was both symbolic and central to her divine identity. Her origins are among the most famous in Greek myth. According to Hesiod and later traditions, Athena was born fully grown and armored from the head of her father Zeus, following a severe headache that struck the king of the gods. This unusual birth, without a mortal or divine mother, reinforced her image as self-contained and independent, untouched by the bonds of passion. The title Parthenus was not merely descriptive, but a key part of her cult. The Parthenon, the grand temple on the Athenian Acropolis, completed in the 5th century BCE, took its name from this aspect of the goddess. Her eternal virginity represented clarity of mind, autonomy, and the ability to remain impartial in the conflicts of gods and mortals. Athena's role as a virgin goddess placed her alongside Artemis and Hestia, the other 2 Olympian deities who vowed never to marry or take lovers. In myth, she is depicted turning away the advances of gods such as Hephaestus, and even punishing mortals who violated her sacred spaces. These stories were not simply cautionary tales, but reflections of her authority and her right to remain untouched. In Greek religion, her purity was intertwined with her role as a protector of cities, especially Athens. Athenians believed her wisdom guided their laws, her strategies secured their victories, and her patronage blessed their arts and crafts. For over a millennium, her image helmeted with spear and shield was a constant symbol of both strength and restraint. This is the story of Athena's eternal virginity as told through ancient Greek mythology, how it began, why it endured, and how it shaped her worship and image across the Greek world. Through examining the myths, rituals, and cultural meanings behind this choice, we uncover a unique portrait of one of antiquity's most enduring deities, Athens, the chosen city. Athens was more than just another city among the scattered settlements of ancient Greece. It was a place whose identity was so completely intertwined with that of a single deity that the very name of the city became a declaration of faith. The Athenians did not simply honor Athena. They regarded her as the living embodiment of their values, their protector in war, their guide in peace, and the inspiration behind their arts, laws, and craftsmanship. For the people who lived in the city, Athena was not an abstract figure dwelling far away on Mount Olympus. She was present in their civic life, their festivals, their architecture, and even the crops that grew in the soil of Attica. The bond between Athens and Athena was explained through one of the most famous myths in Greek tradition. It told of the contest between Athena and Poseidon for the patronage of the city. In this story, which was recorded and retold by ancient authors including Herodotus, Apollodorus, and Pausanias, the gods gathered on the rocky heights of what would later be called the Acropolis. The city, newly founded, needed a divine patron, and both Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategy, and Poseidon, god of the sea, sought this honor. To decide the matter, each god would present a gift to the people, and the more valuable gift would win the city's allegiance. Poseidon stepped forward first. Striking the bare rock of the Acropolis with his trident, he caused a saltwater spring to gush forth. In some versions of the myth, he gave not water, but the first war horse, a gift of speed and power. Athena then presented her gift. She planted the first olive tree, a symbol of peace, prosperity, and endurance. The people, or in some accounts the early king Cecrops, judged the olive tree to be the more useful and enduring gift. It could provide oil for cooking and lighting, wood for tools, and fruit for nourishment. In an age where stability and self-sufficiency were valued, Athena's gift promised long-term benefit rather than immediate force. The decision was made. The city would bear her name and live under her protection. This mythical contest was more than a tale for entertainment. It served as a founding narrative, one that the Athenians returned to again and again when they wished to define their own character. In choosing the olive tree over the spring or the horse, they saw themselves as a people who valued wisdom, foresight, and productive peace over impulsive might. Athena's victory became a symbol of their identity, an image that would appear in their coinage, their temple decorations, and the speeches of their leaders. From that point on, to be Athenian was to live in the city of Athena, to walk streets that were, in a very real sense, her domain. The physical heart of this devotion was the Acropolis. Rising above the rest of the city, the Acropolis was both a fortress and a sanctuary. It had been a site of settlement and worship since the Mycenaean era, long before the classical city took shape. By the 5th century BCE, it had become the most sacred part of Athens, a place reserved for the grand temples of the goddess. To ascend the stone steps to its summit was to pass into an area where the divine and the civic merged into one. The crowning structure was the Parthenon, a temple dedicated to Athena Parthenis, Athena the maiden. Its massive columns of Pentelic marble gleamed in the attic sunlight, and inside stood a colossal statue of the goddess made of gold and ivory, crafted by the sculptor Phidias. This was not only a place for worship, but also a display of Athenian wealth, skill, and devotion. Nearby stood the Erechtheion, another important temple on the Acropolis, known for its distinctive porch of the Caryatides, where sculpted female figures took the place of traditional columns. This building was dedicated to both Athena and Poseidon, reflecting the memory of their ancient contest. According to tradition, the sacred olive tree that Athena had planted still grew here, a living reminder of her gift. Even the smallest shrine on the Acropolis, the Temple of Athena Nike, built to honor her aspect as the bringer of victory, contributed to the overall image of a city watched over by its chosen goddess. Athena's presence was not confined to the heights of the Acropolis. Across Athens, her image appeared in public and private spaces. She was depicted on the city's silver tetradrachm coins, wearing a crested helmet and accompanied by her symbol, the owl. Her figure appeared on pottery used in households, on shields carried into battle, and in sculptures placed in public squares. To see Athena's likeness was to be reminded of the values she represented: wisdom, self-control, and strategic strength. The connection between goddess and city was renewed each year in festivals, the most important of which was the Panathenaea. This celebration, held in honor of Athena's birthday, was marked by athletic competitions, musical performances, sacrifices, and processions. The great Panathenaea, held every 4 years, was especially elaborate. Citizens carried a new robe, or peplus, woven by selected women of the city, to dress the ancient wooden statue of the goddess housed in the Erechtheion. The procession wound through the streets, linking the daily life of the city with the sacred presence of its patron deity. In daily life, Athenians invoked Athena in matters great and small. Craftsmen called on her as the patroness of skilled labor, especially weaving and metalwork. Soldiers prayed to her before campaigns, trusting her guidance in strategy and discipline. Lawmakers and orators invoked her as the goddess of wisdom, seeking to align their policies with her principles. In the city's schools, young Athenians learned stories of her cleverness and fairness, shaping their understanding of justice and leadership. For Athenians, Athena was not only a divine figure to be worshipped in ritual. She was a constant presence in the rhythms of life. The olive groves that spread across Attica were seen as her gift, and the oil they produced was traded across the Mediterranean, carrying a little piece of Athena's city to distant lands. The city's commitment to learning, debate, and the arts was understood as an extension of her wisdom. Even in war, Athenians prided themselves on following the measured, strategic approach that was her hallmark, rather than the reckless aggression of other powers. Over centuries, this devotion shaped Athens into a city that reflected its goddess's qualities. The Athenians cultivated a culture of debate and philosophy, building schools and gathering places where ideas could be tested and refined. They celebrated art and architecture that balanced beauty with function. They trained their armies not only in combat, but in the discipline and planning that Athena favored. And always, above the city, the Acropolis stood as a visible reminder that this was, in the truest sense, the city that belonged to Athena. Worship and rituals, living Athena's presence, following the towering marble of the Acropolis and the mighty temples that crowned it. The living worship of Athena permeated every corner of the city of Athens. The goddess was not a remote figure locked away in lofty sanctuaries alone. Her presence was a constant, breathing reality for the inhabitants of this ancient city. Athena's worship was deeply embedded in the religious, social, and even political fabric of Athens, intertwined with the rhythms of everyday life, as well as the grand ceremonies that marked the city's calendar. The sacred precincts of the Acropolis stood as the physical heart of her cult, but the reach of her veneration stretched far beyond those stone walls, touching the lives of priests and priestesses, artisans and soldiers, statesmen and common citizens alike. The central cult statue of Athena Parthenis, created by the master sculptor Phidias in the 5th century BCE, was a masterpiece of religious art and civic pride. Constructed of gold and ivory, this monumental statue depicted Athena standing tall and majestic, adorned with a helmet and holding a shield and a small statue of Nike, the goddess of victory. This image was not merely decorative. It was an object of reverence, a symbol of the goddess's watchful protection over Athens and its people. Worshippers visiting the Parthenon would have beheld this glittering figure in a dimly lit cella, its serene and commanding presence a focus for prayers and offerings. The care of the statue and the temple itself was entrusted to a group of priests and priestesses, with the high priestess of Athena Polias holding particular prestige. This woman's role was crucial, overseeing the sacred rituals, maintaining the temple's sanctity, and managing the festival preparations. Her office was one of the few religious positions in classical Athens open to women of status, offering a unique spiritual authority in a largely male-dominated society. Priestesses performed many duties beyond tending the temple and statue. They were the custodians of the sacred olive tree, said to have been planted by Athena herself during her contest with Poseidon. This living tree stood as a symbol of peace and prosperity, its branches a reminder of the goddess's enduring gift to the city. The tree was protected with great care, its preservation a matter of both religious and civic importance. Daily worship involved offerings of food, drink, and incense. Small altars dedicated to Athena could be found not only within the Acropolis precinct, but scattered throughout the city. At these sites, citizens brought olive oil, honey, and wine as gifts, the scents mingling in the warm Athenian air to create an atmosphere of reverence and peace. The act of sacrifice, usually the ritual slaughter of goats or sheep, was performed with solemnity and precision, accompanied by prayers for the goddess's favor and protection. The city's calendar was punctuated by festivals dedicated to Athena, chief among them the Panathenaea. This festival, celebrated every year, was both a religious and civic occasion, embodying the unity between the goddess and her city. Every 4 years, the great Panathenaea elevated the event into a grand spectacle that brought together all citizens in celebration and devotion. During the Panathenaea, a new peplus of finely woven robe was crafted by the city's women and presented to the wooden cult statue of Athena, housed in the Erechtheion. This garment was richly embroidered with scenes of Athena's mythic battles and victories, a symbol of the city's ongoing allegiance to their protector. The procession to deliver the peplus was slow and deliberate, with hundreds of participants moving through the city streets, accompanied by music, poetry, and the rhythmic beating of drums. The festival also included athletic competitions, musical contests, and sacrifices. The events reinforced the city's values: physical excellence, artistic achievement, and religious devotion, all under the watchful gaze of Athena. These celebrations were not only moments of entertainment or spectacle, but profound expressions of the collective identity of Athens. Beyond festivals, Athena's worship influenced many facets of daily life. Artisans, especially weavers and metalworkers, regarded her as their patron and protector. The skill and craftsmanship attributed to the goddess inspired those who labored in these crafts, their works dedicated to her honor. In military matters, soldiers invoked Athena's guidance before battle, praying for her strategic wisdom to prevail over brute strength. Athena's symbols, the owl, the olive branch, and the aegis, served as constant reminders of her presence and qualities. The owl, a nocturnal creature, symbolized wisdom and watchfulness. It was frequently depicted in art and even minted on Athenian coins. The olive branch represented peace and prosperity, while the aegis, often described as a protective cloak bearing the head of the Gorgon Medusa, symbolized Athena's power to defend the city and its people. The influence of Athena was also evident in the city's legal and political spheres. The Athenians prided themselves on their system of democracy, and many saw this political order as reflecting the wisdom and balance that Athena embodied. Orators and lawmakers called upon her for inspiration, seeking her clarity of mind and impartial judgment. Throughout the city, small shrines and household altars dedicated to Athena were common. Families made offerings and prayers, seeking her favor in personal matters, from health to success in their trades. This widespread devotion meant that Athena was not confined to the grand temples, but was an intimate presence in the lives of individuals. In sum, the worship of Athena was a multifaceted and pervasive aspect of Athenian life. It blended the grand and the everyday, the sacred and the civic, creating a continuous and living connection between the goddess and her city. Through rituals, festivals, prayers, and symbols, the people of Athens expressed their identity as the city that belonged to Athena, renewing her favor and protection with each passing day. Athena's influence on Athenian politics, arts, and warfare. The city of Athens was not only the physical home of Athena, but also a place where her divine attributes shaped the very essence of civic life. Unlike other gods, who might have been worshipped mainly through ritual or myth, Athena's influence reached deeply into the practical realms of governance, artistic creation, and military strategy. In these areas, the Athenians saw reflections of the goddess's wisdom, discipline, and strategic mastery, and sought to embody her qualities in their collective identity. Athena's role as a goddess of wisdom made her an ideal patron for the political life of Athens, especially as the city developed one of the earliest and most influential forms of democracy in the ancient world. The Athenian system of government was complex, involving assemblies of citizens, elected officials, juries, and various councils, all engaged in a delicate balance of debate, decision-making, and lawmaking. The Athenians believed that such a system required the careful application of reason and foresight traits they attributed to Athena. In the political assemblies held in places like the Pnyx, citizens gathered to discuss and vote on matters of public concern. Orators, who often invoked Athena's name in their speeches, aimed to persuade their fellow citizens not through force, but through the clarity of argument and appeal to justice. The goddess's emblematic qualities of fairness and rational thought were deeply valued as guiding principles. Laws and policies that promoted order, justice, and the welfare of the city were seen as aligning with Athena's spirit. Moreover, Athena was considered a protector of the city's laws and institutions. Sacred oaths taken by public officials and military leaders often called upon her to witness and enforce honesty and duty. The legal courts, where disputes were settled, operated under the watchful eyes of statues and images of Athena, symbolizing her role as a guardian of civic order and justice. Beyond politics, Athena's patronage extended into the arts and crafts, areas where her influence was equally significant. As the goddess of skilled handwork and craftsmanship, she inspired artisans in a wide range of disciplines. Weavers, potters, metalworkers, and sculptors All looked to her for guidance and protection in their work. The art produced under Athena's patronage was not merely decorative. It was an expression of intelligence, precision, and aesthetic balance. In the workshops of Athens, craftsmen dedicated offerings to Athena, seeking her blessing to perfect their skills. The city's famed pottery, often adorned with scenes from myth and daily life, frequently featured Athena herself, either as a participant in stories or as a symbol of wisdom and strength. The depiction of Athena on these vessels served both a decorative and a devotional function, reinforcing her presence in the daily lives of the people. Sculpture and architecture also flourished under Athena's influence. The Parthenon itself was a masterpiece of classical art and engineering, designed not only as a temple, but as a symbol of Athens' cultural and political ascendancy. Its sculptural decorations, including the frieze and metopes, depicted scenes of myth and history, many involving Athena in her roles as warrior and protector. These artistic achievements were a testament to the city as reverence for the goddess and their desire to embody her virtues. Athena's connection to warfare was complex and unique among the Greek gods. While many deities represented raw martial power or chaotic destruction, Athena was the goddess of strategic warfare wisdom applied to the battlefield. She embodied disciplined, calculated combat rather than reckless violence. This distinction was reflected in how Athenians viewed their own military endeavors. Soldiers and generals sought Athena's guidance in planning campaigns, trusting her to grant insight into tactics and strategy. Before battles, prayers and sacrifices were made to secure her favor. The goddess was often depicted carrying a shield or aegis, symbols of protection and strength. Unlike Ares, the god of brutal war, Athena's presence on the battlefield promised order amid chaos. The city's navy, which played a crucial role in Athens' rise to power, was also under Athena's patronage. The olive tree she had gifted was closely linked to the timber used for shipbuilding, and her wisdom was believed to extend to naval strategy. The success of the Athenian fleet, especially during conflicts such as the Persian Wars, was often attributed in part to her divine favor. Beyond formal institutions, Athena's influence was felt in the intellectual and philosophical life of the city. Athens was the birthplace of many thinkers and schools of thought, where inquiry, debate, and education were held in the highest regard. Athena, as the goddess of wisdom and crafts, was naturally associated with the pursuit of knowledge and understanding. Philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle, though writing centuries later, looked back to Athena's figure as an emblem of reason and virtue. The city's commitment to education and intellectual development was seen as a continuation of Athena's legacy. The goddess was not only a protector of the city's physical walls, but also of its ideas and ideals. In homes and public spaces, Athena's symbols continued to serve as daily reminders of her presence and values. The owl, silent and watchful, represented her wisdom and ability to see what others could not. The olive branch symbolized peace and prosperity, encouraging citizens to seek harmony both within themselves and in the community. The aegis, often shown as a cloak bearing the terrifying head of Medusa, signified protection and the power to ward off harm. These symbols were woven into the city's visual culture and its collective consciousness. Coins minted in Athens bore Athena's image and the owl, circulating her likeness throughout the Mediterranean. Statues and reliefs adorned temples, public buildings, and private homes, offering a constant visual invocation of her protection and guidance. Athena's influence extended to the city's laws concerning citizenship, education, and military service. Young men preparing for citizenship and participation in the city's political life were educated in the virtues that Athena embodied: wisdom, courage, discipline, and justice. These values were instilled through formal schooling, physical training, and participation in civic rituals. In times of crisis, such as invasions or civil unrest, Athenians turned to Athena for strength and guidance. Temples became places of refuge and hope, where citizens could pray for deliverance. The goddess's image was carried into battle as a talisman of protection and victory. Throughout centuries, the identity of Athens and Athena remained inseparable. The city saw itself as a reflection of the goddess's qualities, and its inhabitants as her chosen people. This relationship shaped not only the political and military achievements of Athens, but also its cultural and intellectual heritage. In this way, Athena was far more than a mythological figure. She was a living presence in the minds, hearts, and actions of Athenians. Her eternal virginity symbolized not only personal purity, but also the city's striving for wisdom, balance, and self-mastery. Through politics, art, warfare, and daily life, the city that belonged to Athena sought to embody the virtues she represented, crafting a legacy that would endure long beyond the ancient world. As the sun rose each day over the city of Athens, it illuminated not only the marble of the Acropolis and the bustling streets below, but also a living tradition that had taken root through centuries of devotion to the goddess Athena. This tradition was woven into the very fabric of the city, encompassing not only religious practices and political ideals, but also the spiritual and cultural identity of its people. Athena's influence stretched beyond the immediate spheres of temple worship, public festivals, and civic life, reaching into the philosophical, artistic, and moral dimensions that defined what it meant to be Athenian. The goddess's eternal virginity, often noted in myths and stories, symbolized a form of purity that transcended personal chastity to reflect the city's aspirations for wisdom, self-mastery, and incorruptibility. This ideal was not merely a mythic detail, but a guiding principle that shaped the city's character across generations. Philosophers and thinkers of Athens often invoked Athena as a symbol of reason and intellect, embodying the harmonious balance between thought and action. The Academy of Plato and the Lyceum of Aristotle, two of the most famous schools of philosophy, were part of a broader cultural environment that valued inquiry, debate, and the pursuit of knowledge. These intellectual traditions were in many ways an extension of Athena's gift to the city, the gift of wisdom and strategic understanding. The arts, too, flourished under Athena's watchful gaze. Playwrights, poets, sculptors, and painters drew inspiration from her stories and symbols. Tragedies performed in the great theaters of Athens often featured Athena as a figure of divine authority, justice, and protection. The narratives explored the tension between human frailty and divine wisdom, reminding audiences of the goddess's role as a mediator between the mortal and immortal worlds. In the workshops and studios of Athens, craftsmen continued to honor Athena as their patron. The intricate patterns woven into textiles, the detailed reliefs carved into marble, and the finely shaped bronze weapons and armor all bore witness to a devotion that was as much about excellence and skill as it was about faith. These creations were offered as gifts to the goddess in her temples, or carried by citizens as talismans of her favor. This dedication extended beyond aesthetics and intellectual pursuits to encompass the ethical and moral values held by the community. Athena's virginity symbolized a form of discipline and self-control that was admired and emulated. It was a model for the city's leaders and citizens alike, encouraging temperance, fairness, and wisdom in governance and personal conduct. Athens' identity as the city of Athena was reinforced in the daily lives of its inhabitants through customs, education, and rituals that emphasized these values. Children were raised with stories of the goddess's cleverness, bravery, and purity, instilling a sense of pride and responsibility from an early age. Education focused not only on practical skills, but on cultivating a balanced character, reflecting the ideals embodied by Athena. The city's physical landscape mirrored this spiritual and cultural devotion. Streets, public buildings, and even private homes featured images and symbols of Athena, creating an environment where the goddess's presence was felt in every aspect of life. The owl, the olive branch, and the aegis served as constant reminders of the virtues the city sought to uphold. Even in moments of hardship, such as war, famine, or political upheaval, Athenians turned to Athena for guidance and hope. The goddess's protection was sought in prayers and sacrifices, and her image was a source of comfort and strength. The enduring relationship between city and deity offered a sense of continuity and stability amid the uncertainties of life. The legacy of Athena in Athens was thus not confined to a single era or event, but was a continuous thread running through the city's history. It shaped the way Athenians understood themselves, their place in the world, and their relationship with the divine. This bond between goddess and city endured even as political fortunes shifted and centuries passed. As the city evolved, the story of Athena's eternal virginity remained a powerful symbol. It reminded Athenians that wisdom and strength, when combined with purity of purpose and self-restraint, were the foundations of a just and prosperous society. This ideal transcended the boundaries of myth to become a lived reality, guiding the city's development and the lives of its people. In closing this chapter on the city that belonged to Athena, it is worth reflecting on the quiet power of such a connection between a people and their patron deity. The devotion of Athens to Athena was not only an act of worship, but a continuous expression of identity and values. The goddess's presence was felt in the stones of the Parthenon, in the olive groves stretching beyond the city, in the minds of philosophers and leaders, and in the hearts of ordinary citizens. Athens was a city shaped by wisdom, courage, and discipline, qualities embodied in the eternal virgin goddess who watched over it. The story of this city and its goddess invites us to imagine a world where divine ideals and human aspiration blend seamlessly, creating a legacy that continues to echo through time. As you settle into rest, imagine the gentle light of dawn spilling over the Acropolis, the soft murmur of the olive trees, in the breeze and the calm presence of Athena steadfast and eternal guarding the city that was forever hers. How Athena born from Zeus without mother, the origins of a unique birth. In the vast and intricate world of ancient Greek mythology, the stories of gods and goddesses tell us more than just tales of power and adventure. They speak to the deep beliefs, values, and ideas of a civilization that sought to understand the universe through symbolism and allegory. One of the most remarkable and intriguing stories in this mythology is the birth of Athena, a goddess unlike any other. Her birth was extraordinary, unlike the births of other gods and mortals, for she was said to have been born directly from Zeus himself, without a mother. To truly grasp the significance of Athena's birth, it is important to step back and consider the place of birth stories within Greek myth. Myths about the origins of gods often served as foundational narratives, explaining not only the physical arrival of a deity, but also their nature, role, and relationship to other beings, and the world itself. Birth myths were not simple accounts of parentage, but carried deep symbolic meanings that reflected cultural ideals, natural phenomena, and the qualities attributed to the divine figure. Athena's birth story is especially striking because it breaks from the natural pattern of birth. In most Greek myths, gods and goddesses have both a mother and a father to divine parents whose union produces a new being. This union often represents a coming together of different forces: sky and earth, sea and land, order and chaos. But Athena's birth defies this pattern. It is a story that centers solely on Zeus, the king of the gods, and from his own head she springs forth fully formed. The earliest literary source to provide a detailed account of Athena's birth is the Theogony by Hesiod, composed around the 8th century BCE. Hesiod's work serves as a genealogical map of the gods, explaining the origins and relationships of the divine beings in a structured manner. In his poem, Athena's arrival is portrayed as a dramatic and powerful moment that symbolizes the emergence of wisdom and strategic thought from the raw force, embodied by Zeus. According to Hesiod, Zeus was suffering from a terrible headache, an affliction that seemed to press upon his mighty mind with unbearable weight. This headache was not simply physical pain, but a metaphor for the birth of a new kind of power, a power of intellect and reason rather than brute strength. Seeking relief, Zeus called upon Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith and craftsman, known for his skill with tools and fire. Hephaestus, wielding a mighty hammer, struck Zeus's head with a single decisive blow. From this blow, the goddess Athena sprang forth, not as an infant requiring nurturing, but as a fully grown warrior, clad in shining armor, carrying a spear and shield, and wearing a helmet crowned with a crest. Her birth was a sudden and awe-inspiring event, accompanied by a fierce war cry that echoed across the heavens, announcing the arrival of a goddess who embodied wisdom, courage, and strategic warfare. This image of Athena's birth carries multiple layers of meaning. On one level, it expresses the idea that wisdom is born from the mind itself, a direct product of thought and reason. The fact that Athena emerges from Zeus's head, rather than from a womb, aligns her with intellectual faculties and strategic insight rather than physical or emotional impulse. The symbolism of the hammer blow by Hephaestus adds another dimension to the story. It suggests that the birth of wisdom and strategy may come through pain, struggle, or sudden revelation. The goddess's emergence is not gentle or nurturing, but forceful and commanding, reflecting the qualities that she would embody as a deity. Athena's birth also establishes her unique relationship with Zeus. As her sole parent and source, Zeus is both her progenitor and protector, granting her a special status among the Olympian gods. This connection signifies her importance in the divine hierarchy and highlights the trust and favor she enjoys as Zeus's favored daughter. Yet, despite her close ties to Zeus, Athena remains distinctly separate from him and other gods through her eternal virginity. Unlike other deities who engage in various relationships and unions, Athena is traditionally portrayed as a virgin goddess, symbolizing independence, purity, and self-control. This aspect of her character is deeply connected to the manner of her birth, a birth without a mother, free from the bonds of typical familial and sexual relations. The concept of virginity in Athena's case extends beyond a simple state of chastity. It is a metaphor for her role as a goddess of the mind, untainted by passion or desire, focused solely on wisdom, craft, and the defense of justice and order. Her virginity represents a purity of purpose and intellect, a dedication to higher ideals above personal or earthly concerns. As the myth of Athena's birth spread through ancient Greek culture, it took on variations and interpretations that enriched its significance. Different poets, playwrights, and artists added their own perspectives, sometimes emphasizing her martial aspects, other times highlighting her role as a protector of cities, a patron of crafts, or a guide for heroes. The absence of a mother in her birth story allowed ancient Greeks to view Athena as a deity who transcended ordinary human experiences, embodying ideals that were both divine and aspirational. She was not subject to the cycles of birth, growth, and decay, but existed as an eternal symbol of wisdom and strength. To the citizens of Athens, the city that bore her name and claimed her as its protector, Athena's birth story was more than myth. It was a foundational truth that informed their identity and values. The idea that their patron goddess emerged fully armed and wise from the mind of the highest god reinforced the city's self-image as a place of intellect, strategy, and disciplined power. This tale was reflected not only in literature, but also in art and religious practice. The image of Athena emerging from Zeus's head inspired sculptures, vase paintings, and temple decorations, each portraying the goddess's birth as a moment of divine brilliance and strength. Temples such as the Parthenon celebrated this origin story through their architectural symbolism and sculptural programs, embedding it in the very stones of the city. As you imagine this extraordinary birth, picture the great throne of Zeus on Mount Olympus, a throne of power and authority surrounded by clouds and lightning. Envision Zeus, his brow furrowed in pain and concentration, summoning the divine craftsman Hephaestus to his side. See the moment when the hammer falls, And from the fractured mind of the king of gods, Athena steps forth, a vision of calm strength and clarity, a goddess born not of flesh, but of thought. This is the beginning of Athena's journey, a journey that would shape the fate of gods and mortals alike. Her birth story stands as a symbol of the power of wisdom, the emergence of order from chaos, and the eternal link between divine intellect and human aspiration. In the next part of this chapter, we will explore how this myth was interpreted and reinterpreted by later generations, how it was depicted in art and literature, and what it meant to the ancient Greeks who lived under Athena's watchful gaze. We will delve into the deeper symbolic meanings behind her unique birth and consider how it shaped her role among the Olympian gods and in the hearts of her worshippers. As we continue our exploration into the extraordinary birth of Athena from the head of Zeus, it becomes clear that this myth was not a static tale told only once. Instead, it evolved across centuries, gaining layers of meaning and nuance through the works of poets, playwrights, historians, and artists. Each generation found in Athena's birth story something new, an emblem of their own values, aspirations, and understanding of the divine. To the ancient Greeks, myths were living stories, capable of adaptation and reinterpretation rather than fixed historical accounts. Athena's unique origin, where she sprang fully formed and armored from the mind of the king of gods, was a powerful symbol that spoke to the mind's primacy over physicality, of wisdom and strategy emerging from raw power. But how did this idea resonate with people across time, and how is it represented in the art and culture that surrounded them? Early literary interpretations, the earliest known account, Hesiod's Theogony, as we have seen, sets the foundation for the myth by emphasizing Athena's birth as a cerebral event, an eruption of intellect from the divine head of Zeus. This image marked Athena as a goddess who was fundamentally different from others, a deity born of thought and reason rather than flesh and blood. However, not all ancient authors agreed on every detail. Later writers expanded, elaborated, or altered the story in subtle ways to reflect their own perspectives. For instance, some versions introduced Metis, the goddess of wisdom and cunning, as an important figure in Athena's birth narrative. In these traditions, Metis was swallowed by Zeus while pregnant with Athena, and it was from Zeus's mind that Athena was ultimately born. This addition added another symbolic layer, wisdom, Metis, internalized by Zeus, giving birth to a new form of wisdom, Athena. This swallowing of Metis by Zeus also carried political and philosophical symbolism. It represented the absorption of female wisdom into the masculine power of Zeus, allowing for a new synthesis of intellectual authority. Athena thus stood as the ultimate product of combined wisdom, born directly from the head of the ruling god. Such myths were not merely fanciful stories, but reflected deep ideas about the origins of knowledge, power, and divine authority. The notion that Athena was born fully formed and ready for battle spoke to the Greek ideal of the rational mind capable of immediate action, decisive, clear, and pure. Athena in classical literature and drama moving forward in time. Athena's birth and character became popular themes in classical Greek literature and drama. Playwrights such as Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides often incorporated Athena into their works, using her divine authority to explore themes of justice, war, and wisdom. Though the precise details of her birth were sometimes only briefly mentioned, the presence of Athena as a divine figure shaped many narratives. In Aeschylus's trilogy, Oresteia, for example, Athena plays a crucial role as a mediator and judge, embodying reasoned judgment and the establishment of legal order. Her origins as a goddess born of Zeus's mind reinforced her association with reason and law rather than passion and chaos. The story of her birth was also sometimes dramatized in ritual contexts and religious festivals, where her emergence symbolized the triumph of order over chaos and wisdom over violence. Through these performances, the myth was made tangible to audiences, inviting them to reflect on the values embodied by Athena and the divine principles underlying their society. Artistic depictions of Athena's birth. Athena's birth was a favored subject for artists, particularly during the classical period, when the Greeks sought to visualize their myths in sculpture, vase painting, and temple reliefs. Each artistic representation conveyed the myth's dramatic moment with subtle variations, offering a window into how the story was understood and appreciated. One of the most famous artistic depictions is found on the west pediment of the Parthenon in Athens. This massive sculptural ensemble shows the birth of Athena in a grand theatrical manner, with Zeus at the center and Athena rising fully armed from his head. The figures surrounding them, including Hephaestus wielding his hammer, add to the sense of a divine and awe-inspiring event. This image was not merely decorative. It was a statement of civic pride and religious devotion. The Parthenon itself, dedicated to Athena Parthenis, or Athena the Virgin, stood as a monumental tribute to the city's patron goddess and her unique origin. The birth scene symbolized the city's identity, wisdom, power, and purity emerging from the highest authority. In vase paintings, smaller-scale depictions allowed the myth to be more widely disseminated. These often show the moment of Athena's emergence with a focus on dynamic movement and symbolic details, the gleam of her armor, the sharpness of her spear, and the astonished faces of the gods witnessing the birth. The repeated portrayal of this moment throughout Greek art underlines its importance in the cultural imagination. Symbolic interpretations, beyond its literal telling, Athena's birth myth held deep symbolic meaning. The image of her springing from Zeus's head reflected Greek ideas about the source of wisdom and power. The head, as the seat of reason and intellect, was the perfect metaphor for the birth of a goddess who embodied mental clarity and strategic thought. The violent act of Hephaestus's hammer blow symbolized the sometimes painful process of insight and revelation. Wisdom was not gentle or passive, but required strength and decisiveness. Athena's immediate readiness for battle upon birth underscored her role as a protector, one who used intellect to guide strength rather than succumbing to mere force. Moreover, the myth of Athena's birth contrasted sharply with the birth stories of other deities, particularly those associated with fertility and nature, whose births were often connected with cycles of life, growth, and sexual union. Athena's virginity and singular birth set her apart as a goddess who transcended the natural world, embodying ideals of purity, self-control, and rationality. In philosophical terms, Athena could be seen as an archetype of the human mind's highest faculties. Her emergence from Zeus, the king of gods and symbol of supreme authority, linked intellectual power directly with divine rule and cosmic order. Religious and civic significance. For the people of Athens, Athena was more than a mythological figure. She was their protector, their patron, and a symbol of their city's values. The story of her birth reinforced the idea that wisdom and reason were at the heart of Athenian identity. Religious ceremonies, especially the Panathenea festival, celebrated Athena's birth and honored her as the city's guardian. Through sacrifices, processions, and offerings, Athenians renewed their bond with the goddess and reaffirmed their commitment to the ideals she represented. The Parthenon's sculptural program, including the birth scene, was a visual reaffirmation of this sacred relationship. It communicated to all who entered the city the divine origin of their protector and the source of their collective strength. Influence on later cultures and thought. The story of Athena's birth continued to inspire and influence cultures beyond ancient Greece. Roman writers, Renaissance artists, and modern scholars have all revisited the myth, interpreting it through their own lenses and continuing to find relevance in its symbolism. Philosophers have often pointed to Athena as an embodiment of reason and wisdom, while artists have portrayed her birth as a moment of sublime transformation. The image of a goddess born fully formed from the head of the king of gods remains a powerful metaphor for sudden insight in the birth of new ideas. Imagine, as you listen, the reverent quiet of an ancient temple filled with flickering oil lamps. Picture worshippers gathered to honor Athena, contemplating the story of her birth, seeing in it the embodiment of their highest aspirations. The flicker of flame casts shadows on marble statues. The soft murmur of prayers fills the air, and the goddess's image looms as a symbol of wisdom, born of divine power. The myth of Athena's birth was never simply a story told for entertainment. It was a living narrative, a foundation stone for how ancient Greeks understood wisdom, power, and the divine. It connected the city of Athens to the cosmos, linking human intellect to the authority of the gods. In the next part, we will continue to explore the lasting impact of Athena's birth story on religious practices, mythological narratives, and how it shaped the goddess's complex role among the Olympian deities and in the hearts of her worshippers. As we continue to unravel the profound influence of Athena's birth story, it becomes increasingly clear that this myth was not merely a tale of divine origins, but a living force shaping ancient Greek religion, culture, and collective identity. This story, the birth of a goddess springing fully formed from the head of Zeus, served as a cornerstone for how Athena was understood, worshipped, and revered across the centuries. The legacy of Athena's unique birth permeated every facet of religious practice, artistic expression, and mythological narrative. It symbolized more than her extraordinary entrance into the world. It established the framework for her complex and vital role in the Olympian pantheon, the city of Athens, and the broader Greek cultural landscape. Athena's role in religious ceremonies and civic life. One cannot fully appreciate Athena's impact without considering the religious rituals that sustained her worship and honored her divine presence. The city of Athens, her principal sanctuary, and the place where her myth resonated most deeply, celebrated her through grand festivals such as the Panathenaea. This event, held annually and reaching its zenith every 4 years, was a magnificent blend of religious devotion, civic pride, and cultural spectacle. During the Panathenaea, Athenians came together to offer prayers, sacrifices, and gifts to Athena. Central to the festivities was the presentation of the peplos, a finely woven robe embroidered with scenes depicting Athena's life and exploits. This robe was carefully draped over her statue, housed in the Parthenon, the magnificent temple perched atop the Acropolis. The Parthenon itself was a monumental tribute to Athena, Parthenis Athena. The Virgin and its very stones whispered the story of the goddess's birth, wisdom, and protection. The rituals of the Panathenaea were suffused with the symbolism of Athena's birth. The image of the goddess emerging fully armed from the mind of Zeus was evoked as a reminder that she was not simply a divine figure to be worshipped, but an embodiment of the ideals Athenians sought to embody: wisdom, courage, strategic thought, and purity. These ceremonies were not only religious acts, but also a way for the people to affirm their shared identity. Through the telling and retelling of Athena's birth story during the Panathenaea and other festivals, Athenians reinforced their connection to the goddess and to the values she represented. The narrative of a virgin goddess, born of the mind rather than the body, became a metaphor for the city's emphasis on intellect and discipline over passion and disorder. Symbolism and the virgin goddess. Athena's eternal virginity was closely linked to her unusual birth. Unlike many other deities whose stories emphasized fertility, sexuality, and natural cycles, Athena stood apart as a symbol of self-mastery and independence. Her virginity was not merely about physical chastity, but about the purity of purpose and clarity of intellect. This purity resonated with the Greek conception of wisdom as something pristine, undiluted by personal desire or earthly distractions. Athena's virgin birth thus became a powerful allegory for the emergence of pure intellect, untainted by emotion or corporeal concerns. She was the goddess of rationality and strategy, of crafts and warfare conducted with clear-headed precision. In this way, Athena's birth story provided a blueprint for her worshippers to aspire toward an ideal of mental discipline, strength under control, and unyielding dedication to justice and order. The symbolic virginity underscored her role as a protector not only of cities, but of civic values themselves. Athena's place in the Olympian hierarchy. The myth of Athena's birth also significantly influenced her position among the Olympian gods. As the daughter born directly from Zeus, without the involvement of a mother, Athena was uniquely tied to the king of the gods, symbolizing the unity of wisdom and supreme authority. Within the pantheon, this birth set her apart, giving her a status that combined both intimacy with and independence from Zeus. She was his favored child, often portrayed as his trusted counselor and strategist, helping him maintain cosmic order and resolve disputes among gods and mortals alike. Unlike other deities who had complex familial relations and often turbulent interactions, Athena's relationship with Zeus was marked by mutual respect and shared purpose. Her birth from his mind itself implied a continuity of divine intellect and power, a seamless extension of his will. This special status allowed Athena to assume a range of roles: warrior, protector, judge, and patroness of arts and crafts. She was both a fierce defender of justice and a nurturing guide to heroes and craftsmen, embodying the dualities of war and wisdom, strength and intellect. Athena in mythological narratives. The influence of Athena's birth myth extended deeply into the narratives of Greek mythology. She is frequently portrayed as a divine helper to heroes such as Odysseus, Perseus, and Heracles, offering counsel and protection. Her presence in these stories is often a reflection of her birth symbolism. She represents the strategic mind that can see through confusion and danger, guiding mortals with clarity and purpose. Athena's birth myth also casts light on her interactions with other gods and goddesses. Her virginity and intellectual nature often placed her in contrast to figures like Aphrodite, the goddess of love and desire, or Hera, the goddess of marriage and family. This contrast emphasized different aspects of divine femininity and power in the Greek imagination, highlighting Athena's role as a deity of reason and order in a pantheon filled with diverse and sometimes competing forces. Artistic and cultural legacy. Artists, sculptors, and writers over centuries have drawn inspiration from Athena's birth story, crafting representations that capture her strength and intellect. The Parthenon sculptures, with their intricate depictions of Athena's birth, remain among the most iconic images of classical antiquity, a testament to the goddess's enduring significance. Vase paintings, mosaics, and reliefs across the ancient Greek world often illustrate the moment of Athena's emergence, her gleaming armor and serene yet commanding presence symbolizing the ideals she embodied. These artworks were not merely decorative, but served as visual reminders of the values of wisdom, courage, and disciplined strength. The story of Athena's birth, through its vivid and powerful imagery, has transcended its ancient origins to continue influencing art, literature, and philosophy even into modern times. The broader cultural meaning, beyond its religious and mythological contexts, Athena's birth story reflects a broader cultural ideal that ancient Greeks held dear: the triumph of intellect over chaos, of reason over impulse. Her emergence from Zeus's head serves as a metaphor for the birth of order from the raw power of the universe. In a civilization that prized philosophy, strategy, and civic responsibility, Athena's narrative provided a divine example of these qualities. She was not only a goddess to be worshipped, but a symbol of the human capacity for reason, justice, and disciplined action. As you listen and imagine the story of Athena's birth and lasting influence, picture the sacred spaces of Athens, the Parthenon standing tall against the sky, its marble columns shimmering in the sunlight, its sculptures telling the story of a goddess born from the very mind of the king of gods. Feel the quiet reverence of worshippers gathered in her honor, their voices lifted in song and prayer, their hearts inspired by the ideals she represents. This is the power of myth, not only to explain the divine, but to shape the values and identity of a people. Athena's birth story continues to echo through time, inviting us to reflect on the origins of wisdom, the nature of power, and the enduring human quest for knowledge and order. The enduring legacy of Athena's birth and her timeless influence. As we reach the concluding part of this chapter, reflecting upon the lasting impact of Athena's extraordinary birth, it is important to contemplate how this myth has transcended its ancient origins to shape not only the religious and cultural life of Greece, but also the broader human imagination. The image of Athena springing fully formed, armored, and wise from the head of Zeus is more than an origin story. It is a profound symbol of the birth of intellect, reason, and order from the primordial forces of the cosmos. This symbolism resonated deeply with the ancient Greeks, who saw in Athena a divine embodiment of qualities essential not only to the gods, but to human civilization itself. Athena's birth as a symbol of intellectual emergence. The tale of Athena's birth captures a moment of transformation, a passage from chaos and raw power into conscious thought and strategy. It evokes the idea that wisdom is not inherited through lineage or born of physical union, but arises from within, a spark ignited in the mind. This conceptual birth aligns with the Greek philosophical tradition, where the mind, or nous, was regarded as the highest faculty, capable of apprehending truth and guiding action. Athena, born from Zeus's head, stands as a divine personification of this ideal, reminding mortals of the potential within themselves for clarity, insight, and rationality. The violent yet purposeful hammer strike by Hephaestus that brought her forth adds another layer of meaning. It illustrates that enlightenment often comes through disruption or challenge, that the emergence of wisdom can be sudden, piercing, and transformative. The timeless virginity of Athena. Athena's eternal virginity, inseparable from her unique birth, has echoed through centuries as a symbol of independence, purity, and autonomy. This aspect of her identity differentiates her from many other mythological figures and situates her as a goddess who exists beyond the typical human experiences of birth, marriage, and reproduction. Her virginity represents a devotion to higher ideals and an unyielding commitment to purpose. It embodies a state of being where intellect and strength operate free from the entanglements of personal desire or passion. In this way, Athena's character becomes an aspirational figure, one who balances might with wisdom and strategy with moral clarity. The city of Athens, which bore her name and revered her as its patron, embraced these qualities as central to its identity. Athena's virgin birth and attributes provided a divine foundation for the values of the polis discipline, justice, and the pursuit of knowledge. Athena's influence beyond ancient Greece. Though rooted in Greek culture, the myth of Athena's birth has reached far beyond its original context. The Romans adopted Athena as Minerva, maintaining many of her attributes and revering her as a goddess of wisdom and war. In the Renaissance, artists and thinkers revived classical themes, portraying Athena's birth as a metaphor for intellectual awakening and the power of human reason. Her image graced paintings, sculptures, and literature, inspiring generations to consider the origins of wisdom and the nature of power. Even in modern times, Athena's myth continues to hold fascination. She appears in literature, popular culture, and philosophical discourse as a symbol of intelligence, courage, and principled strength. Her birth story, so vividly imagined millennia ago, remains a touchstone for reflecting on the human condition, the myth and the modern mind, as you listen to the story of Athena's birth. Imagine the quiet halls of ancient temples, where priests recited her myth under flickering torchlight. Visualize the serene majesty of her statues, crafted by skilled hands to embody her strength and wisdom. Hear the murmurs of worshippers offering prayers, their hopes and fears intertwined with the divine narrative. In our modern world, where knowledge and reason continue to shape our lives, Athena's myth reminds us of the enduring power of intellect. It encourages us to recognize wisdom as something born within, cultivated through challenge and reflection, and wielded with courage and clarity. Her birth from Zeus, without a mother, invites us to contemplate the origins of ideas, the nature of creativity, and the possibility of transformation that arises from within ourselves. Closing reflections. The story of Athena's birth is a journey into the heart of ancient Greek thought, religion, and culture. It is a tale that combines mystery and meaning, violence and revelation, divinity and human aspiration. As the goddess who sprang fully armed from the mind of the king of gods, Athena stands as a timeless symbol of the mind's triumph, a beacon of wisdom, strategy, and purity that has guided humanity through the ages. And so, as we close this chapter, imagine yourself in the calm presence of Athena. Feel the quiet strength of her gaze, the steady rhythm of her breath, and the eternal wisdom she embodies. Let her story settle gently in your mind, a soft illumination as your thoughts drift toward rest. In the next chapter, we will explore another remarkable aspect of Athena's myth, her eternal vow of virginity. We will delve into the reasons behind this sacred promise and how it shaped her identity and relationships throughout Greek mythology. Until then, let the enduring story of Athena's birth from Zeus without a mother linger softly in your thoughts. A peaceful melody of intellect and grace. Why Athena swore the eternal vow. To understand why Athena swore the eternal vow of virginity, one must first immerse themselves in the world from which this vow arose. A world woven from myth's sacred ritual and the deeply symbolic language of the ancient Greeks. Athena's identity as a goddess was unlike that of many others in the Olympian pantheon. She was not merely a goddess of war, nor solely a deity of wisdom. She was the bridge between intellect and action, between reason and strategy, between the quiet clarity of the mind and the decisive movements of the battlefield. In that unique position, her vow of eternal virginity was not simply a refusal of romantic or physical union. It was a declaration, a sacred and immutable statement of her autonomy, her independence from the entanglements that bound others, mortal or divine. For Athena, the mind was her true domain, and she guarded its freedom as carefully as she guarded the walls of the cities under her protection. The divine context of the vow in the mythology of ancient Greece, virginity carried a meaning far beyond the physical. To be a virgin goddess was to be complete in oneself, to need no partner to define one's identity or purpose. This was a rare state among the Olympians. Hera's identity was tied to her role as Zeus's wife and queen of the gods. Aphrodite's power was intertwined with love and desire. Demeter's story revolved around her bond with her daughter. Athena's vow set her apart entirely. It was not imposed upon her by another god. It was her own choice, her own declaration of the path she would walk. The Greeks called her Parthenis, meaning the maiden, a title that became central to her worship. So central, in fact, that one of her most famous temples, the Parthenon in Athens, literally bore that name. This vow was not about denial, but about focus. In refusing the roles and expectations placed upon others, Athena preserved herself for the service of higher ideals: justice, wisdom, protection of the polis, and the guidance of heroes. Athena's role as protector of cities. The Greeks envisioned Athena as the ever-watchful guardian of their communities. She was not a goddess who visited only in times of war. She was there in the planning of walls, in the building of ships, in the laying of laws, in the teaching of crafts. The stability of a city was, in many ways, like the stability of the mind. It required discipline, order, and an unshakable foundation. Athena's vow symbolized this stability. By keeping herself free of personal entanglements, she remained impartial and focused solely on the welfare of her people. In Athens, her role was deeply intertwined with civic life. Festivals in her honor celebrated not her romantic stories, for she had none, but her deeds, her guidance, her counsel. The Panathenaic Festival, one of the grandest events of the Athenian year, culminated in the presentation of a new robe to the ancient wooden statue of Athena Parthenis, symbolizing the renewal of her protection over the city. The goddess and the heroes, Athena's vow, also shaped her relationships with mortals, especially heroes. She was the patron and guide to many: Odysseus, Perseus, Heracles, and others, yet these relationships were never romantic. Instead, she stood beside them as a mentor, strategist, and protector. The absence of romantic entanglement meant that Athena's aid was not clouded by desire or jealousy, emotions that often complicated the interventions of other gods. Her guidance was clear, her motives pure, her loyalty unshaken. This detachment became part of her divine signature. Heroes could rely upon Athena not because she favored them for personal reasons, but because they embodied qualities she valued: intelligence, courage, perseverance. A symbol for the ages. In swearing her eternal vow, Athena became a model of independence, self-sufficiency, and clarity of purpose. For the ancient Greeks, this was not merely a personal choice by a deity. It was a cosmic statement about the nature of wisdom and the responsibilities of power. Wisdom, like Athena, must remain free from corruption. It cannot be swayed by passion, bribery, or personal gain. It must serve truth and justice, unbound by ties that might weaken its resolve. Athena's vow was, in essence, the embodiment of this principle, a divine metaphor for the steadfastness of the mind in the pursuit of what is right. As centuries passed, this image of Athena as the eternal virgin endured. Artists depicted her in gleaming armor, her expression calm yet unyielding, her hand steady on her spear. Temples rose in her honor, not to celebrate romance or fertility, but to honor the guardian of cities, the defender of intellect, and the unshakable figure of moral clarity. In the next part of this chapter, we will explore how myths and stories across the Greek world tried to test Athena's vow, and how she responded when her autonomy and honor were challenged. These tales, some cautionary and others symbolic, reveal even more about why Athena's eternal maidenhood was central to her identity and how fiercely she defended it. Why Athena swore the eternal vow, the vow of eternal virginity once declared by Athena, was not a fragile or symbolic promise. It was an unshakable element of her very essence, embedded in the divine nature that the Greeks believed had been fixed since her miraculous birth from the head of Zeus. Unlike oaths sworn by mortals, which could be broken or compromised under pressure, this vow was eternal, impermeable, and as constant as the goddess herself. But Greek myth, with its restless creativity and its fascination with testing the boundaries of divine law, could not resist imagining scenarios in which this vow would be challenged, defended, or reaffirmed. These challenges were not idle inventions. They were, in a sense, a proving ground away for storytellers, priests, and poets to demonstrate, over and over again, that Athena's resolve was not theoretical but active and invincible. In these myths, her chastity was not portrayed as a passive state preserved simply by isolation or luck. It was a living force defended with the same precision and energy that she applied to the defense of a city's walls. To the ancient Greek imagination, Athena's vow was a bastion of self-mastery, an impenetrable fortress of the spirit. The tale of Hephaestus and the unwanted pursuit, one of the most famous and, in many ways, awkward stories to illustrate this truth, is the myth involving Hephaestus, the god of the forge. This tale appears in multiple sources: Aeschylus's Eumenides, the Bibliotheca of Apollodorus, and various fragments and scholia from later antiquity. Hephaestus was no ordinary suitor. Crippled in body but unmatched in craftsmanship, he was the divine blacksmith, the one who forged the armor of the gods themselves. Athena and Hephaestus shared common ground in their mutual appreciation for skill, precision, and artistry. It is said that Athena visited his forge not infrequently, both to commission works of exquisite utility and to observe the delicate marriage of intellect and labor that Hephaestus embodied. Somewhere in these encounters, the god of the forge began to imagine a different kind of union, one It was not merely intellectual or professional. In a world of gods where desire often led to impulsive action, Hephaestus's admiration grew into pursuit. One day, when Athena came to request the forging of a new weapon, he saw what he believed to be an opportunity. The myth tells us that Hephaestus tried to seize her in an embrace. Athena, startled but not unprepared, reacted instantly. She pushed him away with the same decisive force that would later be seen in her martial exploits. In the struggle, Hephaestus's seed spilled upon her thigh. The goddess, repulsed, wiped it away with a scrap of wool and cast it upon the earth. From that wool and soil, the child Erichthonius was born of being part divine, part mortal, destined to become an early king of Athens. The Athenians would later embrace him as a foundational figure, even seeing his unusual birth as a kind of blessing from their patron goddess. But the central moral of the myth was not about Erichthonius. It was about Athena's unshaken autonomy. Her vow was not broken, not even technically compromised, for she had never consented. The physical outcome of the encounter became secondary to the moral and symbolic. 1. Athena had defended herself instantly and decisively. To the ancient Greeks, the awkwardness of this myth did not obscure its purpose. If anything, it heightened the lesson. Here was a goddess who could not be seduced, coerced, or taken by surprise. In a culture where mortal women often had little agency over marriage or sexuality, Athena's resistance stood as an almost shocking image of independence and personal sovereignty. Medusa and the sanctity of the temple. Another story connected, albeit indirectly, to Athena's vow is that of Medusa. In its most famous form popularized by Ovid's Metamorphoses, but with earlier Greek roots, Medusa was once a mortal woman of great beauty, serving as a priestess in Athena's temple. Her hair was said to rival the gold of the harvest and the gleam of worked bronze, a detail that made her irresistible to Poseidon. One day, within the sacred confines of Athena's temple, Poseidon forced himself upon her. The act was not only a violation of Medusa, but a desecration of the goddess's most sacred space. Temples were the earthly homes of the gods, inviolable in their sanctity. For such a crime to occur within them was an outrage that demanded divine response. Athena's reaction has troubled interpreters for centuries. In Ovid's account, she transforms Medusa into a Gorgon monstrous in visage, with serpents for hair and a gaze that turned men to stone. Some modern readers view this as unjust punishment of the victim. Others, however, have argued for a more symbolic interpretation, that Athena's transformation was an act of grim empowerment, rendering Medusa untouchable to any man ever again. Whichever reading one prefers, the underlying theme is constant Athena defended the sanctity of her temple, which was an extension of her vow. The temple was a physical manifestation of her purity and independence. A violation of it was akin to a direct attack on the goddess herself. The gigantomachy and the shield as symbol Athena's virginity also appears more subtly in depictions of the great cosmic battles, such as the gigantomachy, the war between the Olympians and the giants. In the marble friezes of the Parthenon, Athena appears mid-strike, her spear in motion, her shield raised. This shield, the aegis, was more than a piece of armor. It was a symbol of impenetrability. In myth, it could repel any attack, inspire terror in enemies, and was often depicted adorned with the head of Medusa, an emblem of divine wrath and inviolability. For the Greeks, Athena's chastity functioned much like this shield. It was an unbreachable defense, a refusal to allow entry to any who might compromise her independence. In the gigantomachy, Athena's actions are never clouded by romantic entanglements or personal vendettas. Her motives are clear, her strategies unclouded by passion. This was the ideal to which her vow pointed, wisdom unswayed by desire, leadership untainted by bias. Why these myths endured, the persistence of these stories across centuries and regions, was not accidental. In Greek culture, myth was not just entertainment. It was a form of cultural memory, a vessel for values and ideals. Athena's vow was both a theological truth in the minds of the faithful and a moral allegory. Mortal women could rarely imitate her autonomy, bound as they were by the social structures of ancient Greece. But Athena's image offered a vision of what absolute self-possession might look like. She was not defined by father, husband, or son, but by her own mind and purpose. In the next part of this chapter, we will explore how Athena's vow shaped her worship, not just in myth, but in ritual, architecture, and civic life. We will see how every statue, every festival, and every epithet subtly reinforced the idea of the eternal maiden, and how that image became so deeply intertwined with the identity of Athens itself that the city could not be imagined without her. When we turn from the stories of Athena's vow to the tangible living practices of the ancient Greek world, we find that this oath was not an abstract idea locked away in the realm of myth. It was something woven into the very heartbeat of the city of Athens. The vow lived in stone and bronze, in the quiet halls of temples, in the murmured prayers of citizens, and in the grand processions that wound through the city's streets. Every year, every season, every act of worship served to remind Athenians that their patron goddess was unlike any other. Her eternal maidenhood was not merely a point of divine biography. It was a civic truth, one they built their identity upon. The temples as silent testaments. The most famous monument to Athena's vow was, of course, the Parthenon. Standing atop the Acropolis, it was not simply a masterpiece of architecture, but a proclamation in marble. Its very name, Parthenon, meaning of the Virgin, declared Athena's title, Athena Parthenis, to all who saw it. When sunlight touched its white pentelic marble, it seemed to glow, a beacon that could be seen from far out at sea. For the sailors approaching the Piraeus, the sight was a reassurance that Athena still stood watch over her city. The temple's columns, precise and harmonious, spoke of discipline, order, and perfection, the same qualities the Athenians saw in their goddess's character. Inside stood the colossal statue of Athena Parthenis, crafted by the sculptor Phidias. She was clad in gleaming gold and ivory, her spear upright, her shield resting at her side. Her gaze, carved with serene confidence, gave no hint of vulnerability. In her hand, she held a figure of Nike, the goddess of victory, as if to remind the viewer that wisdom and chastity could also lead armies to triumph. Every visitor who stepped into that temple entered a space shaped by the vow. No tales of lovers adorned the walls. No myths of children or consorts were celebrated here. Instead, the imagery emphasized protection, strategy, and victory scenes from the Gigantamachi, the Amazonamachi, and other battles where Athena's resolve and clarity of mind had guided the outcome. Festivals that kept the oath alive. Ritual, too, carried the imprint of Athena's eternal vow. The most significant of these was the Panathenaea, a festival held every 4 years in her honor. The celebration lasted several days and combined athletic competitions, music, poetry, and religious observance. But the central event was the procession to the Acropolis, where a newly woven peplisa, ceremonial robe, was presented to the ancient wooden statue of Athene Polias, Athena of the city. This robe was not a garment of vanity, but a symbol of renewal, protection, and devotion. The weaving itself was an act of community, with the city's women participating in the careful creation of its intricate patterns. The peplos often depicted the god's victory over the giants, placing Athena at the heart of divine order. Draping it upon the statue was an act that renewed the city's bond with its goddess, a reaffirmation that they honored her as the eternal maiden, the vigilant guardian of their walls. At no point in these festivals was Athena honored as a goddess of romance or fertility, as other deities might be. The songs, dances, and sacrifices all reinforced her image as protector, strategist, and embodiment of disciplined wisdom. Civic life under the maiden's gaze. Athena's vow shaped not only the religious life of Athens, but its civic identity. Laws were passed in her name. Oaths of office invoked her protection. Military strategies were planned with her counsel in mind. To betray the city was, in a sense, to betray Athena herself, for she was seen as an ever-watchful force guarding its stability. In the courts, statues of Athena sometimes presided over proceedings, a silent reminder to judges and citizens alike that justice was sacred, that decisions must be made without the cloud of personal bias. Her vow, after all, symbolized freedom from entanglement, an ideal mirrored in the impartiality expected of the law. Craftsmen, too, claimed her patronage. Potters, metalworkers, and builders all saw in Athena the union of mind and hand. To work well was, in a way, to honor her, demonstrating the same precision and clarity that defined her own divine works. The epithet as a constant reminder, in speech, in writing, and in formal inscriptions, Athena was rarely named without one of her epithets. Parthenius, the maiden, Polius of the city, and Promatros, she who fights in the front, were among the most common. Each epithet was like a small thread in the tapestry of her vow. Parthenius spoke directly to her eternal maidenhood. Polius connected that vow to the civic realm, reinforcing the idea that her purity and independence were bound up with the health of the city. Promatros reminded Athenians that chastity was not weakness, it was a form of strength, allowing her to stand unencumbered in the thick of battle. These titles were not casual. In ancient religion, the name of a god carried power. To speak Athena's epithets was to invoke not just the goddess, but the specific aspects of her being that the city depended upon. The vow as political symbol in the competitive world of Greek city-states, Athena's vow also served a political function. Athens could present itself as a city under the patronage of a goddess who was incorruptible, impartial, and committed to the common good. This contrasted sharply with rival cities whose patron deities were bound up in more personal or chaotic myths. Diplomats and envoys visiting Athens could not fail to notice this distinction. They would have walked the streets lined with temples and altars, seen the statues of Athena in armor, and understood the message. Here was a city that claimed to be guided by wisdom, discipline, and moral clarity. The vow became part of Athens's brand, so to speak, a divine endorsement of its role as a leader among Greek states, not only in warfare, but in law, philosophy, and the arts. A living presence in the daily mind. For the ordinary Athenian, Athena's vow was not some distant myth remembered only at festivals. It was a daily reality. Farmers might pray to her for fair weather, sailors for safe passage, craftsmen for steady hands. In each case, the prayer was shaped by her character. She was not a goddess who granted favors in exchange for love or flattery. She was one who responded to discipline, effort, and the pursuit of excellence. Even the very layout of Athens, with the Acropolis rising high above the city, served as a constant visual reminder. The Parthenon was visible from many streets and squares, its presence silently reinforcing the ideals it represented. To live in Athens was to live in the shadow of the vow, not in a way that was oppressive, but in a way that gave meaning and unity to civic life. In the next part, we will explore how Athena's vow, so central to her worship in Athens, influenced her depiction beyond the city. Swalls how other Greek states, and even later, civilizations interpreted her eternal maidenhood, adapting it to their own culture's politics and philosophies. This broader view will show how a vow sworn in myth could shape the imagination of an entire world. While the city of Athens held Athena as its exclusive patron and eternal guardian, her vow of eternal virginity was never confined to this single place. The rich tapestry of Greek culture, woven from countless shared stories and common reverence for the gods, allowed Athena's image virgin, warrior, strategist to travel far beyond the Acropolis and the borders of Attica. Her story was retold, reshaped, and reimagined in ways that reflected the unique character of each city-state, each region, and each later civilization that encountered her legacy. This vow, born as a sacred promise within the heart of Athens, became a symbol that transcended geography and time, evolving with the changing values and aspirations of the peoples who worshipped her. Across the varied city-states of ancient Greece, Athena's eternal maidenhood took on different shades of meaning, shaped by the local cultures and priorities. In the militaristic society of Sparta, for instance, Athena was known as Athena Chalkiokos, Athena of the Bronze House. This title itself suggested something strong, unyielding, and resilient. The Spartans, renowned for their austere way of life and their devotion to the art of war, saw in Athena's vow a reflection of their own discipline. For them, her virginity was not merely a personal condition, but a profound act of renunciation, a dedication to readiness and vigilance without distraction. Just as Spartan warriors rejected personal indulgences for the good of the state, Athena's eternal vow symbolized a focus on the collective well-being, a sacrifice of individual desire in favor of communal protection. The bronze-roofed temple dedicated to her stood as a testament to this ideal, its gleaming metal roof a metaphor for the impenetrable armor of self-control and duty. Moving from the martial plains of Sparta to the bustling commercial hub of Corinth, Athena's vow was understood through an altogether different lens. Corinth was a city famed for its trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchanges, an ever-turning crossroads of ideas, goods, and power. Here, Athena's eternal virginity took on the symbolic mantle of incorruptibility. In a world where fortunes could be made or lost in whispered deals, where alliances were forged and broken with shifting winds, Athena was the steadfast principle that no transaction could override. She was the guardian of unyielding values, a reminder that certain truths and duties remained inviolable amidst the flux of commerce and politics. This idea permeated Corinthian public life and art, where Athena was often depicted alongside figures representing negotiation and trade, symbolizing the necessary balance between flexible engagement and firm integrity. On the island of Rhodes, where the sea was both a source of wealth and a constant threat, Athena's vow was embraced as a symbol of perpetual watchfulness. The famed Colossus of Rhodes, though officially a statue of the sun god Helios, was sometimes likened in later accounts to Athena herself. The monumental figure stood sentinel over the harbor, a silent protector with gaze cast far over the horizon. For the Rhodians, Athena's eternal maidenhood was more than chastity. It was a metaphor for unwavering guardianship. In the ever-shifting, sometimes treacherous realm of the sea, the goddess's vow embodied the steadfast presence of security and order against the chaos of nature. The rhythm of their lives, bound to the tides and trade winds, found a kind of reflection in her eternal vigilance. Even in places where Athena was not the primary deity, the ideals attached to her vow, the unbending strength, the strategic mind, the incorruptible guardian, were invoked in art, civic ritual, and political discourse. The ancient Greeks saw in Athena's maidenhood a powerful emblem, not just of sexual purity, but of discipline, impartiality, and self-mastery. These qualities became woven into the fabric of Greek identity itself, embraced and reinterpreted wherever her influence spread. When the Romans came to inherit and adapt the pantheon of the Greeks, Athena was absorbed under the name Minerva. Yet, Rome's practical and expansive culture reshaped her vow of eternal virginity with a distinctly Roman sensibility. Minerva became not only the virgin goddess, but also the revered patroness of guilds, craftsmen, scholars, and teachers, those devoted to knowledge, skill, and the betterment of society through learning and work. Her chastity was recast as a symbol of focus and self-mastery, virtues held in the highest esteem within Roman civic life. During the festival of Quinquatria, artisans, poets, and intellectuals honored Minerva with offerings and celebrations that highlighted her as the embodiment of clear intellect and purposeful creation. Where Venus stirred passions and desires, Minerva represented the cool clarity of the mind, unclouded by distractions. The Roman perspective on her vow emphasized mental, sovereignty an ideal of freedom from the disturbances of emotion that could derail reasoned thought and action. This conceptualization resonated with a culture that prized order, discipline, and hierarchy, valuing the ability of its citizens, especially leaders and scholars, to govern themselves and the state with unwavering steadiness. In the military sphere, too, Minerva's eternal virginity was upheld as a moral standard. Roman generals, when seeking divine favor, invoked her not for passionate intervention, but for clarity of vision, fairness in judgment, and the elimination of personal bias. Her chastity became a metaphor for the detachment necessary in command, a reminder that decisions must be based on strategy and justice, not on the entanglements of affection or desire. Her presence among the legions was thus less about physical prowess and more about mental discipline, a divine exemplar for those charged with the fate of the empire. As Greek and Roman influence spread far beyond the Mediterranean, carried by conquest, trade, and the movement of peoples and ideas, the figure of Athena through Minerva and other iterations entered the realm of philosophy and political symbolism. Stoic philosophers revered her as the living personification of self-control and the life led in accordance with reason rather than impulse. To the Stoics, her eternal maidenhood symbolized the ideal human who masters passions and loves with an unwavering commitment to virtue and duty. Later philosophical movements, including the Neoplatonists, deepened this interpretation, viewing Athena's vow as emblematic of the soul's ascent toward pure intellect and truth. To them, she transcended the physical realm, becoming a symbol of the mind's liberation from the distractions of the material world. Her eternal virginity thus acquired a mystical dimension, representing the purity and clarity required for divine knowledge and enlightenment. The symbolic power of Athena's vow was also harnessed in art and political thought across the centuries. During the Renaissance, when the revival of classical ideas swept through Europe, artists portrayed Athena as the perfect fusion of martial strength and serene wisdom. Her virginity was no longer simply a mythic fact. It was a sign of intellectual autonomy, a sacred pledge to truth and reason. Her images adorned the halls of princes and scholars alike, inspiring rulers to aspire to justice and governance grounded in clear-eyed virtue rather than caprice. Political theorists of the early modern period used Athena's image as an allegory for the ideal state, one that is self-reliant, incorruptible, and bound by solemn responsibility to protect its people. In their writings, the eternal vow transformed into a metaphor for governance itself, a power dedicated fully to its citizens, untouched by self-interest, passion, or faction. Athena's steadfastness became a standard against which leaders measured their own conduct, and her myth offered a timeless lesson on the duties of power. What allowed Athena's vow to endure and resonate through such a wide array of contexts was its combination of simplicity and profound strength. Unlike many myths that shifted and conflicted with each retelling, the core promise of Athena's eternal maidenhood remained remarkably consistent. From the marble temples of Athens to the bronze statues of Rome, and on to the canvases and treatises of Renaissance Europe, the image of a divine protector bound by an incorruptible oath captured the imaginations of countless generations. In art, whether she was shown in shining armor or flowing robes, with spear or scroll, Athena's vow was conveyed through the very way she carried herself, upright and unyielding, her gaze steady and fixed forward. In literature, she could appear as a goddess walking among mortals, or as a symbol of lofty ideals. But her defining trait, her refusal to be swayed by desire or personal bias, always remained central. Thus, the eternal maiden who once stood sentinel over a single city blossomed into a universal emblem. Her vow became a beacon, not only for the people of Athens, but for anyone seeking a model of incorruptible strength, clear judgment, and selfless dedication. As we continue, we will turn inward to explore how Athena's vow shaped her interactions with mortals and other gods. We will see how her deliberate choice to remain apart from romantic entanglements influenced The way she mentored heroes, bestowed favor, and ensured that those who fought under her guidance carried the same steadfast resolve into their own lives and battles. As we continue, we turn inward to consider how Athena's eternal vow of virginity profoundly shaped her relationships, not through romance or passion, but through mentorship, guidance, and unwavering support for those mortals and gods who sought her favor. Her deliberate choice to remain apart from romantic entanglements was not merely a personal decision. It was a foundational aspect of her divine character that influenced every interaction she had with heroes and deities alike. This separation allowed her to maintain clarity, impartiality, and a steadfast resolve that made her a uniquely reliable figure in a world often swayed by desires and emotions. Athena's role as a mentor to heroes is central to the ancient Greek understanding of wisdom and strength. Unlike many gods who intervened in human affairs driven by passion or jealousy, Athena's involvement was guided by reason and strategic insight. When heroes such as Odysseus, Perseus, or Heracles faced daunting challenges, it was Athena who offered counsel, tools, and protection, not out of romantic interest, but because they embodied virtues she valued: intelligence, courage, perseverance, and honor. Her support was given freely, without expectation of reciprocation or personal gain, highlighting the selfless nature of her vow. This dynamic created a pattern where Athena's guidance was a symbol of disciplined mind over unruly passion. For example, Odysseus's cunning and endurance throughout his long journey home were often attributed to Athena's favor. She helped him devise clever strategies, protected him from harm, and even intervened in divine counsels on his behalf. Her mentorship was not about love or affection, but about fostering qualities of leadership and endurance, attributes that reflected her own nature as the goddess of wisdom and war. Similarly, Perseus's quest to slay the Gorgon Medusa was aided by Athena's gift of a polished shield. This shield was no ordinary weapon. It symbolized reflection and clarity. Perseus was instructed to use the shield as a mirror to avoid looking directly at Medusa, whose gaze could turn men to stone. Athena's intervention here was emblematic of her vow. She offered tools that required self-control, careful thought, and disciplined action rather than brute force. It was a lesson in how wisdom and foresight could overcome the most terrifying of obstacles. Athena's interactions with gods were shaped by the same principles. She did not engage in the typical romantic rivalries or jealousies that often characterized the Olympian pantheon. Instead, she operated from a position of reasoned detachment and steadfast resolve. Her relationships with Zeus, her father, and other deities were marked by mutual respect for her autonomy and intellect. Even when gods sought to test or challenge her, Athena's vow ensured that she remained unshaken and true to her path. This steadfastness was sometimes tested in mythological stories where gods attempted to sway or seduce her, but Athena's response was always firm. These narratives served to reinforce the idea that her virginity was not a vulnerability, but a source of strength. It symbolized her sovereignty over her own will and mind, which no god or mortal could undermine. The protective nature of her vow extended beyond herself to the mortal realm. Athena was often seen as the guardian not only of cities, but of their moral and intellectual foundations. By maintaining her independence, she embodied the ideal of a leader who is above personal desires and distractions, fully committed to justice and the common good. This was particularly important in a society where leadership often intertwined with personal ambition and familial ties. Athena represented a different model one of impartiality and wisdom guiding power. Her favoritism towards heroes was thus never capricious or based on emotions, but founded on merit and alignment with her values. Those who carried her favor were expected to emulate her virtues: courage balanced with wisdom, strength disciplined by reason, and success earned through perseverance and insight. This ideal relationship between goddess and hero also reflected a broader cultural aspiration. Athena as eternal virginity was a metaphor for the clarity and purity of purpose required in both personal and civic life. Just as she remained untouched by passion, so too were her favored heroes meant to rise above base impulses and act with integrity. Athena's non-romantic relationships extended as well into the realm of the polis. In Athens, citizens saw her as an ever-watchful protector whose impartiality ensured fairness in law and governance. Her vow was thus not only a personal oath, but a symbol of the civic ideals of balance, wisdom, and justice. It was this intertwining of divine virtue and political order that made her the perfect patron for the city. Through all these interactions, Athena's vow shaped a divine persona that stood apart from the more familiar narratives of love and desire common among the gods. It offered the ancient Greeks a vision of power rooted in self-mastery, intellect, and unwavering commitment to higher ideals. In this way, Athena's eternal maidenhood was not a limitation but a liberation, a conscious choice that allowed her to embody the fullest expression of wisdom and strength. Her relationships, shaped by this vow, became a model of mentorship, moral clarity, and impartial protection, inspiring mortals and gods alike to strive toward their highest potential. As we prepare to explore the final part of this chapter, we will look at the enduring legacy of Athena's vow, how it continued to resonate through art, literature, and culture long after the myths were first told. We will see how the eternal maiden's story persisted as a timeless symbol of autonomy and virtue, influencing ideas about gender, power, and wisdom even into modern times. As we prepare to explore the final part of this chapter, we turn our gaze to the enduring legacy of Athena's eternal vow, a legacy that rippled far beyond the ancient world, weaving itself through centuries of art, literature, and culture. The story of Athena, the eternal maiden, did not simply fade as myth passed into history. Instead, it persisted as a profound symbol of autonomy, virtue, and intellectual sovereignty, shaping ideas about gender, power, and wisdom well into modern times. To understand this lasting influence, one must imagine the many ways Athena was represented, celebrated, and reinterpreted across the ages. From the grand temples of Athens to the pages of Renaissance art and the halls of philosophical discourse, the image of the virgin goddess carried messages that transcended its origins, speaking to universal human concerns about identity, freedom, and the nature of strength. The visual language of Athena's vow. One of the most powerful ways Athena's vow communicated across time was through visual art. In ancient Greece, she was often depicted clad in gleaming armor, helmet poised, spear in hand, and her majestic shield raised as if forever ready to defend. This was no mere martial display. Every element of her portrayal spoke to the purity and strength of her vow. Her virginity was symbolized not by physical markers alone, but through the aura of control and detachment she exuded. Artists captured her calm expression, unflinching gaze, and poised stance qualities that conveyed her unwavering focus and independence. The absence of romantic entanglement was made manifest in her demeanor, a figure of serene authority standing apart from the passions and chaos that often engulfed gods and mortals alike. The Parthenon, Athens' magnificent temple dedicated to Athena Parthenius the Maiden, stood as a monumental testament to this ideal. Sculpted friezes and statues celebrated her as a guardian of the city, a protector whose vow was intertwined with the city's very identity. The statue of Athena Parthenius, inside the temple crafted by the renowned sculptor Phidias, was a towering symbol of her power. Clad in armor holding Nike, the goddess of victory, yet her eyes focused with quiet intensity, embodying wisdom rather than desire. This artistic language continued through Roman times, when Athena's image was adapted as Minerva, maintaining the themes of chastity, wisdom, and martial prowess. Renaissance artists revived her iconography, often emphasizing her intellectual autonomy and purity as a metaphor for enlightened reason and virtue. In paintings, sculpture, and literature, she remained a figure who embodied the ideal of strength untainted by passion. The literary echoes of Athena's vow. Literature, too, played a vital role in preserving and expanding the meaning of Athena's vow. Ancient poets and playwrights explored her character with nuance, portraying her as a goddess who chose the path of virginity not out of denial, but as a conscious embrace of autonomy and purpose. In Homer's epics, Athena appears repeatedly as a guiding force for heroes, her wisdom unclouded by desire, her loyalty unwavering but never possessive. Her support is given freely to those who display valor and intellect, reinforcing her role as a divine mentor and protector. Later writers, such as the Roman poet Ovid, while recounting tales like that of Medusa, reflected on the consequences of divine power and chastity. The transformation of Medusa within Athena's temple, though tragic, highlighted the sacredness of Athena's vow and the inviolability of her domain. Through the centuries, Athena's eternal maidenhood became a recurring theme in mythological retellings and philosophical discussions, inviting contemplation on what it means to hold power without submission, to remain unbound by the forces that commonly influence others. Cultural and philosophical influence. Athena's vow resonated deeply beyond the boundaries of myth and art. It became a symbol around which cultural and philosophical ideas coalesced. In a society where women's roles were often constrained by familial and marital expectations, Athena's independence offered a powerful, if exceptional, model of female autonomy. Her virginity was not portrayed as a lack, but as a positive, active state, a choice to remain whole and self-directed. Philosophers, especially during the Hellenistic and later Roman periods, admired her as an embodiment of reason, self-control, and virtue. Stoic thinkers, for example, saw in Athena an exemplar of apatheia, a state of being free from passions that disturb the mind. Her eternal vow symbolized the ideal human condition, living guided by reason rather than impulse or desire. This philosophical reading continued through the Renaissance and into the Enlightenment, where Athena's figure inspired thinkers who sought to reconcile power with moral integrity. She became a metaphor for enlightened governance, where rulers were expected to act with wisdom and justice, unclouded by personal ambition or emotional entanglements. Gender, power, and modern reflections. In more recent centuries, Athena's eternal virginity has sparked reflection and debate about gender and power. Feminist scholars and cultural historians have examined her as a figure who challenges traditional narratives of female identity, offering an image of womanhood defined not by relationship to men, but by intellectual and moral agency. Her vow invites reconsideration of the ways autonomy and strength can manifest, not as opposites of femininity, but as integral components of it. The eternal maiden stands as a symbol of self-possession and resistance to societal expectations that often seek to limit women's roles. At the same time, Athena's story reveals the complexities and contradictions inherent in such a symbol. Her virginity, while empowering, also distances her from the more human experiences of love, desire, and family. This duality continues to provoke thought about the costs and benefits of absolute independence. The vow is a timeless metaphor ultimately. Athena's eternal vow is a metaphor that transcends its mythological roots. It speaks to the human quest for self-mastery, clarity of purpose, and the courage to stand apart from forces that might dilute one's convictions. Whether as a goddess guarding a city, a mentor guiding heroes, or a philosophical ideal, Athena's virginity embodies the steadfastness of the mind and spirit. It is a promise to remain true to oneself and to higher ideals, regardless of external pressures. As we conclude this chapter, it is clear that Athena's vow was never a mere mythological detail. It was, and remains, a profound statement about the nature of wisdom, power, and autonomy, a story that continues to inspire and challenge us, inviting reflection on what it means to live with integrity and resolve. With these thoughts, we bring to a close our exploration of why Athena swore the eternal vow. In the next chapter, we will turn to the final part of our journey, the ways in which Athena's identity as the eternal virgin goddess has outlived even her own myths, continuing to shape culture and imagination through the ages. How Athena the virgin goddess outlived her own myth. Before we begin our exploration into how Athena, the eternal virgin goddess, outlived her own myth, it is important to reflect on the remarkable journey of this divine figure. Born from the very head of Zeus, untouched by mortal women, bound by a vow of eternal maidenhood, Athena's story was rooted deeply in the ancient world's understanding of wisdom, strength, and independence. Yet, what is most extraordinary is not merely the origins of Athena or the sacred vow she swore, but how this identity transcended the confines of myth itself. Across centuries and civilizations, through shifts in religion, politics, philosophy, and culture, Athena's image did not merely survive, it evolved, adapted, and continued to inspire. This chapter traces the long, winding path of Athena's legacy beyond the age of Greek gods and mythmakers. We will see how she was carried forward into Roman culture as Minerva, how Christian thinkers wrestled with and reinterpreted her symbolism, and how Renaissance artists and Enlightenment philosophers revived her as a beacon of reason and virtue. Athena became more than a goddess frozen in the stories of old. She became a living symbol, a cultural archetype, and a source of inspiration that shaped the collective imagination long after the ancient temples fell silent. Imagine for a moment the ancient city of Athens, the Parthenon standing proud atop the Acropolis, bathed in the warm Mediterranean sunlight. Though the statue inside was made of gold and ivory, fragile over time, the idea of Athena was etched deep into the minds and hearts of its people. But as centuries passed, political power shifted, empires rose and fell, and religions changed, yet the essence of Athena, her virginity, wisdom, and strength found new forms and new voices. This part of our journey begins by exploring the immediate aftermath of classical Greek religion, the Hellenistic period and Roman Empire, and the ways Athena's image transformed and was integrated into wider Mediterranean culture. We will also consider how, despite the gradual decline of pagan worship, her symbolism refused to fade, instead embedding itself in unexpected places, influencing art, politics, and philosophy. The transformation of Athena beyond her original myth was a gradual, complex process. The Hellenistic period, following the death of Alexander the Great, saw Greek culture spread far beyond the borders of the original city-states. Greek language and ideas traveled across Egypt, the Near East, and even into India, through a blending of cultures, often referred to as Hellenism. In these new cultural crossroads, Athena was sometimes merged with local goddesses or reinterpreted in ways that maintained her core attributes, but adapted to different religious sensibilities. In Egypt, for example, Greek settlers encountered goddesses like Isis, who was also a powerful protector and symbol of wisdom, but with a different focus motherhood and magic. Yet the Greek settlers continued to honor Athena as a symbol of strategic warfare and civic order. Temples dedicated to her began to appear outside Greece proper, testifying to her expanding cultural presence. As the Roman Republic and later Empire grew in power, Athena was adopted into their pantheon as Minerva. Though the name changed, the essence remained. Minerva's virginity and wisdom became central to Roman values around discipline, skill, and civic responsibility. Roman literature, from Virgil to Ovid, often portrayed Minerva as a fierce but rational protector, a goddess whose chastity was not an absence, but a source of strength and clarity. In the political arena, Minerva became a symbol of the Roman state's ideals. Her image adorned coins, public buildings, and military standards. Senators and generals would invoke her aid not only for victory in battle, but for wise governance and just leadership. Her eternal vow was thus transformed into a metaphor for the incorruptibility expected of those who held power. Yet this was not merely a straightforward continuation of Greek ideas. Roman religion and politics were pragmatic and adaptable. Minerva was associated not just with war and wisdom, but with crafts, trade guilds, and intellectual pursuits. The goddess evolved from a protector of cities to a patron of knowledge and innovation. Her virginity was understood as a metaphor for untainted knowledge and self-mastery, qualities vital to the Roman ideal of a disciplined, ordered society. Even as the Roman Empire moved toward Christianity, the figure of Minerva persisted in art and thought. Christian writers often viewed pagan gods as false or demonic, but the intellectual legacy of Athena, Minerva, survived in allegorical form. Medieval and Renaissance scholars and artists rediscovered her as a symbol of wisdom and virtue, translating her ancient story into Christian iconography and philosophical treatises. During the Renaissance, Athena's image underwent a profound revival. Humanists and artists looked back to classical antiquity with admiration, seeking to recover the wisdom and beauty of the past. Athena was no longer just a goddess of myth. She became an emblem of reason, civic virtue, and enlightened power. Painters such as Botticelli and Raphael depicted her with serene majesty, combining her warrior aspect with a serene intellectual grace. Her eternal virginity was celebrated as an allegory of intellectual purity and moral steadfastness. This interpretation resonated with Renaissance ideals of self-discipline and the pursuit of knowledge. Athena became a muse for scholars, poets, and rulers who sought to embody the fusion of strength and wisdom. In philosophy, Athena's story inspired debates about the nature of virtue and the ideal ruler. Enlightenment thinkers admired her as a symbol of reason triumphing over passion, an ideal that mirrored emerging ideas about governance and individual rights. The virgin goddess's vow became a powerful metaphor for personal autonomy and moral clarity. Despite the passage of time, Athena's image remained strikingly relevant. She was a figure who could be reimagined and reinterpreted to meet the needs of changing societies. Her story, rooted in divine myth yet blossoming into cultural icon, reminds us that myths are not static relics, but living narratives that continue to shape human understanding. As we close this first part of the chapter, consider how Athena's eternal virginity, once a sacred oath made in the ancient world, grew into a symbol whose meanings expanded far beyond the stories of gods and heroes. It became a cultural touchstone for ideas about independence, wisdom, and strength, an image that outlived the temples and myths that first bore it. In the next part, we will delve deeper into how Athena's story persisted through the Middle Ages and beyond, including how her symbolism was preserved, transformed, and sometimes contested in a world increasingly dominated by new religions and philosophies. We will also explore the ways artists and thinkers kept the spirit of the virgin goddess alive, ensuring that Athena's legacy continued to influence generations long after the original myths had faded from common memory. As the ancient world shifted and the Roman Empire gave way to the Christian era, the religious landscape underwent profound transformations. Pagan cults and rituals that once flourished across the Mediterranean were gradually supplanted by Christian doctrine and worship. Temples once dedicated to Athena, the virgin goddess, lost their sacred status, and the direct worship of the Olympian deities diminished. Yet, Athena's mythic presence did not disappear entirely. Instead, it was woven into new cultural, artistic, and intellectual traditions, adapting to the changing spiritual environment in ways that allowed the essence of the virgin goddess to endure. During the early medieval period, Athena's identity as the eternal maiden took on symbolic meanings that resonated with Christian values, particularly the ideals of chastity and purity. Though no longer venerated as a living deity, Athena's virginity found a parallel in the revered status of the Virgin Mary and the many female saints who pledged their lives to spiritual devotion and celibacy. This alignment of ideals helped to preserve Athena's image as a powerful symbol of self-control, wisdom, and moral integrity. Manuscript illuminations, religious iconography, and medieval texts sometimes featured figures reminiscent of Athena helmeted, armed, and resolute, representing virtues such as wisdom, justice, and divine protection. These images subtly echoed the ancient goddess's role, repurposed within a Christian worldview. Athena's shield and spear became allegories for the spiritual armor necessary to guard the soul against sin and temptation. Meanwhile, the ruins of Athena's temples, such as the majestic Parthenon perched atop the Acropolis of Athens, stood as silent monuments to a vanished era. These structures fascinated scholars, travelers, and artists who, despite the rise of new faiths, felt drawn to the grandeur and symbolism embedded in their stones. The physical remnants of Athena as worship served as tangible links to a past where the eternal virgin goddess had been central to city life and identity. The Byzantine Empire, inheriting much of the Greco-Roman intellectual tradition, preserved Athena's legacy through the study and transmission of classical texts. Philosophers and historians continued to reference her as an embodiment of wisdom and strategic mastery. Even as theological debates raged and new religious doctrines emerged, Athena's archetype lived on in the classrooms and libraries of Byzantium. Beyond Byzantium, the Islamic Golden Age became a conduit for the preservation and expansion of classical knowledge, including Greek philosophy and mythology. Thinkers in the Islamic world translated and studied texts by Plato, Aristotle, and other ancient authorities who frequently invoked Athena's spirit of wisdom and reason. Through Arabic translations and commentaries, Athena's image subtly permeated the intellectual traditions that would later influence the European Renaissance. With the dawn of the Renaissance, a profound revival of interest in classical antiquity swept through Europe. Artists, poets, and scholars sought to rediscover and emulate the ideals of the ancient world, including the complex figure of Athena. This period marked a remarkable reimagining of the virgin goddess, not only as a mythological character, but as a symbol of humanist values, intellect, virtue, and the power of reason. Renaissance painters portrayed Athena with renewed reverence, often emphasizing her calm dignity, martial prowess, and unyielding resolve. The themes of her eternal virginity were explored not as mere myth, but as allegories of self-mastery, purity of purpose, and the pursuit of wisdom, untainted by worldly distractions. Sculptors recreated her in classical poses, blending idealized form with contemporary artistic innovations. Athena's image transcended art to influence political and philosophical thought. Renaissance rulers and city-states adopted her as a patron and protector, embodying ideals of just governance, courage, and intellectual leadership. The allegory of the virgin goddess became a powerful metaphor for the incorruptible ruler, one who governs not through passion or personal interest, but through wisdom and impartiality. Literature and philosophy further cemented Athena's legacy. Writers drew on her myth to explore tensions between reason and emotion, independence and social duty, intellect and passion. Athena's vow of eternal virginity, once a divine oath, became a symbol for the human struggle to live guided by reason and principle. At the same time, Athena's story raised complex questions about gender and power. Her autonomy and detachment from romantic relationships made her a unique figure in a world where women's roles were often narrowly defined by marriage and family. This complexity inspired both admiration and debate, influencing ideas about femininity, authority, and virtue for centuries to come. As the Renaissance matured and the Age of Enlightenment dawned, Athena's symbolism adapted yet again. The rise of science, reason, and secular philosophy found in her an enduring emblem of intellectual clarity and moral steadfastness. Athena was no longer worshipped as a goddess, but revered as an archetype of wisdom and civic virtue, her eternal virginity now representing the purity and focus necessary for the advancement of knowledge and just society. Public monuments, academic institutions, and literary works continued to evoke her spirit. Athena's presence in the cultural imagination served as a reminder of the values that transcend time wisdom, courage, and self-discipline. Her myth became a living tradition, continuously reinterpreted and renewed by each generation. Thus, even as the myths that first told her story receded into the past, Athena, the virgin goddess, persisted. She outlived the ancient world that created her. Her image and ideals transformed, but never forgotten. Through the shifting tides of history, religion, and culture, the eternal maiden remained a beacon of intellect, autonomy, and virtue, a testament to the enduring power of myth to shape human understanding across the ages. In the next part, we will explore how Athena's story continued to influence the modern world, how her symbolism appears in contemporary culture, literature, and even popular media, demonstrating that the virgin goddess's legacy remains vibrant and relevant, centuries after the ancient myths were first told. As we move from the Renaissance and Enlightenment into the modern era, it becomes clear that Athena's presence has not simply faded into dusty archives or classical studies. Instead, she has emerged repeatedly as a powerful cultural symbol, adapted and reimagined in ways that reflect the concerns, ideals, and anxieties of successive generations. Athena's image as the eternal virgin goddess, embodying wisdom, strategic prowess, and moral integrity, has found expression in political discourse, feminist thought, literary works, visual arts, and even the digital realms of film, television, and video games. The figure of Athena has been continually invoked as a symbol of strength and intellect in a world where these qualities are both admired and contested. Her myth has served as a flexible narrative, offering a lens through which societies can examine questions about power, gender, autonomy, and the tension between reason and passion. Athena in political and civic symbolism. In modern times, Athena is often seen as an emblem of democratic ideals and civic responsibility. Her ancient role as the protector of Athens, the cradle of democracy, has made her a natural symbol for governance based on wisdom, justice, and reasoned debate. Many cities, institutions, and governments have adopted her likeness in statues, seals, and logos to convey these values. For example, the United States Capitol features a statue known as the Athena Parthenis, modeled after the classical statue in Athens. This modern incarnation of Athena represents the principles of law, order, and reasoned governance that underpin democratic society. In this context, her eternal virginity is interpreted less as a personal vow and more as a metaphor for the incorruptibility and impartiality expected of just leaders. Furthermore, Athena's strategic and martial aspects have been embraced by military organizations and law enforcement agencies as a symbol of disciplined strength and ethical authority. Her image frequently appears on medals, insignias, and official seals, reminding those who serve that wisdom must guide power and that strength without justice can become tyranny. Athena and feminism. A complex legacy. The figure of Athena has held a particularly rich and sometimes contradictory place within feminist discourse. As a goddess who chose virginity and independence over traditional female roles of marriage and motherhood, she embodies autonomy and self-determination. For many feminist thinkers and activists, Athena represents a powerful archetype of female agency and intellectual strength. However, this symbolism has also sparked debate and critical examination. Athena's eternal virginity, while a source of empowerment, also raises questions about societal expectations placed upon women regarding sexuality and virtue. Some argue that the idealization of chastity can become a restrictive narrative, one that defines female worth in terms of purity rather than a full spectrum of human experience. Nonetheless, Athena's image continues to inspire. In literature, she appears as a figure who defies conventional gender roles, offering a model of womanhood rooted in wisdom, courage, and leadership. Contemporary feminist art and writing often reclaim Athena's story, highlighting her refusal to be confined by patriarchal norms and celebrating her as a symbol of intellectual and moral autonomy. Athena in literature and popular culture. Athena's influence on literature, stretches from classical epic poetry to contemporary novels and graphic storytelling. She frequently appears as a character or motif in works that explore themes of heroism, wisdom, and the human struggle to balance reason with emotion. In modern fantasy and speculative fiction, Athena's myth is often reimagined and reinterpreted. Authors weave her traits into their characters, creating heroes and heroines who embody her strategic mind, unwavering focus, and protective spirit. These narratives reflect ongoing fascination with the tension between intellect and passion, the ethical dilemmas faced by those in power, and the enduring quest for wisdom in an uncertain world. Beyond literature, Athena has found a significant place in popular media. Films and television series that draw on classical mythology regularly include her as a pivotal figure. Sometimes she is portrayed in a manner faithful to ancient sources, calm, wise, and martial. Other times, she is adapted to fit contemporary storytelling, embodying complex personalities that resonate with today's audiences. Video games and digital media have embraced Athena's image as well, often casting her as a powerful, strategic warrior or mentor figure. These portrayals reinforce her role as a symbol of empowerment and intellectual mastery, introducing her myth to new generations in interactive and engaging formats. Visual arts and public monuments artists across centuries have continually returned to Athena's image, capturing the nuances of her character and symbolism through sculpture, painting, and public monuments. The representation of Athena in modern art often highlights her dual nature as both a warrior and a scholar, a protector of cities and a patron of the mind. Public statues and monuments dedicated to Athena serve not only as artistic expressions, but also as cultural statements. They remind communities of the values she represents: courage, wisdom, justice, and the unwavering commitment to the greater good. In parks, university campuses, and government buildings worldwide, these statues invite reflection on the enduring power of myth and the ideals that shape society. The enduring symbolism of the virgin vow central to Athena's lasting appeal is the symbolic power of her eternal virginity. Far from being merely a relic of ancient religious belief, this vow continues to provoke thought and inspire. It challenges modern audiences to consider what it means to live a life dedicated to principles above personal desire, to maintain clarity of purpose amid the distractions and complexities of human experience. Athena's vow is often interpreted as a metaphor for intellectual independence, the refusal to be swayed by passion or corruption, the commitment to pursue truth and justice regardless of circumstance. In this way, the virgin goddess transcends her mythological origins to become a universal symbol of integrity and self-mastery. Moreover, Athena's choice to remain apart from romantic entanglements offers a model for alternative paths of identity and fulfillment. Her example invites contemplation of the many ways individuals can define themselves beyond societal expectations and roles, affirming the value of autonomy and focused purpose, modern reflections, and continuing relevance. The story of Athena, and especially her eternal vow, continues to resonate in contemporary discussions about leadership, gender, ethics, and identity. As societies grapple with questions about power and responsibility, Athena's myth provides a framework for exploring the virtues of wisdom, restraint, and impartiality. Her image encourages reflection on the balance between strength and compassion, the importance of strategic thinking in governance and conflict, and the ongoing human endeavor to live in accordance with higher ideals. In a world often marked by division and turmoil, Athena stands as a reminder that clarity of mind and steadfastness of purpose can guide us toward justice and peace. In education, Athena's story enriches curricula that connect students with classical literature, philosophy, and history, fostering appreciation for the cultural roots of Western thought. Her myth invites learners to engage with complex questions about morality, society, and the human condition, promoting critical thinking and ethical awareness. In popular culture, Athena's presence endures through films, books, games, and art that reimagine her for new audiences. These reinterpretations ensure that her legacy remains alive and evolving, offering fresh insights and inspiration in each generation. Thus, Athena the Virgin Goddess has not merely survived the passage of time, she has thrived. Her story, once told around ancient fires and carved into marble, continues to speak to the deepest aspects of human experience. Through countless adaptations and reflections, Athena remains a beacon of wisdom and strength, a timeless figure whose vow of eternal virginity symbolizes a profound commitment to the mind, the city, and the ideals that endure. As we prepare to conclude this chapter, we will next explore how Athena's deliberate choice of virginity influenced her interactions with mortals and gods alike, shaping a legacy that transcends myth to become a lasting cultural and spiritual force. The end of the chapter and the entire video script, as we have journeyed through the vast expanse of Athena as myth from the ancient Acropolis, where white marble columns rose skyward in homage to the far reaches of modern imagination, it still finds echoes of her presence. It becomes abundantly clear that the Virgin Goddess's story is not simply a tale confined to dusty scrolls or marble statues. Rather, it is a living narrative, one that breathes through millennia, softly yet persistently speaking to the human heart. It whispers to us from the corridors of time, inviting us to listen closely, to reflect on the deeper meanings woven into her eternal vow. Athena's eternal virginity, far from being a mere mythological curiosity or a relic of ancient storytelling, stands as a profound symbol. It embodies an ideal of autonomy, wisdom, and unwavering integrity that continues to resonate with people across cultures and centuries. This ideal endures because it touches on fundamental aspects of the human experience. In her vow, Athena represents a commitment to clarity of mind, a dedication to moral integrity, and an unyielding loyalty to a higher purpose beyond the reach of fleeting desire or distraction. These qualities transcend the boundaries of time and culture, offering a quiet beacon of steadiness in a world often marked by turmoil, change, and uncertainty. Her story is a gentle reminder that true strength does not always roar with thunderous force. Sometimes it whispers softly, like a calm stream winding through a forest. Power is not only found in physical might or grand displays, but often lies in the quiet discipline of thought, the steady hand that guides both city walls and the soul. Athena's virginity is not an absence or lack. It is a presence and embodiment of focused intent, of sovereignty over oneself, and of vigilant protection toward the world she watches with unwavering eyes. Throughout history, Athena has been more than just a goddess of war or a deity of wisdom. She has been a symbol of balance, an exquisite harmony between intellect and action, between the cerebral and the practical. Her vow has inspired not only myth-makers and artists, but also philosophers, leaders, and ordinary people who strive to navigate the complexities of their own lives with grace, clarity, and resolve. She is a quiet companion on the path of thoughtful living, reminding us that wisdom is not only knowing, but also the patient application of knowledge for the betterment of community and self. As we reflect on Athena's journey across the tapestry of human history, it is humbling to recognize how a myth born in the ancient Mediterranean continues to echo in the architecture of government buildings, the halls of learning, the pages of novels, and even in the dreams of those seeking guidance and solace. The goddess who emerged fully formed from the mind of Zeus, who chose autonomy over entanglement, and who protected cities with spear and shield, now also guards the corridors of human thought and culture, the temples that once rang with the chants of devoted worshippers, where incense mingled with the morning air and bronze statues gleamed in the sunlight, may have long since fallen silent. The ancient rituals, the processions, and the sacred songs may have faded into the quiet recesses of history. Yet Athena's presence endures, not only in the form of carved stone and faded frescoes, but in the enduring ideals she embodies. Her eternal maidenhood reminds us that some vows, some commitments are timeless. They call us to live with wisdom, to stand firm against distraction and temptation, and to seek justice and truth with a clear, steady heart. As you settle into the quiet rhythm of this moment, imagine the gentle glow of the Parthenon's marble under the soft light of a fading sun, the warmth of dusk settling over the Athenian skyline. Hear the whispered prayers of long-gone devotees carried on a calm, cooling breeze that rustles through olive branches and softly stirs the folds of ancient robes. Feel the steady strength of Athena's watchful gaze, unwavering through the ages, protecting not only the city as walls, but also the mind and spirit of every seeker who calls upon her silent wisdom. Her story of eternal virginity is, in essence, a story of endurance, of how ideals and principles can outlast empires, how symbols can outlive the myths that gave them birth. It is a narrative that invites us all to find our own steady center, to honor the wisdom deep within, and to hold fast to the values that sustain us in moments of doubt or darkness. Through Athena's steadfast example, we learn that strength and virtue can be quiet, resilient, and eternal. With this, we bring to a close the entire story of Athena as eternal virginity, a tale woven from threads of ancient belief, cultural transformation, and timeless symbolism. This story is more than myth. It is a living legacy, a quiet invitation to embrace autonomy, wisdom, and integrity. May the calm strength of Athena's spirit accompany you now as you drift toward rest, wrapped in the quiet embrace of history and myth. May her steady presence guard your mind, gently guiding you toward the peaceful shores of deep and restful sleep. Thank you for joining this slow, soothing journey through the unfolding story of Athena, one of the most enduring figures of ancient myth, whose eternal vow still echoes softly in the quiet places of our modern world. May the peace of her wisdom settle softly within you, a gentle flame glowing warmly in the calm night. Good night,